Hello and welcome back to Mr. Matt's channel here. Remember, you can always hit pause and you can always hit the arrow keys to jump back and forward if you are following along. Today we're going to talk real quick. It's going to be a pretty short video. We're going to talk about a cool feature. Now, a lot of the videos that we've been doing along this way have been us just playing with the tool, kind of free-form making things and not really worrying about being super exact. And today we're going to talk a little bit about using a feature here called the ruler tool to help us make placements of shapes in a more specific manner, something that maybe is required by the design that we've imagined or the problem that we're trying to solve. And it requires us to place shapes in very specific distances. And we want to make sure that they are placed there, and we can go ahead and use this really cool feature called the ruler tool. Now, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to place a plane, and I'm going to make a plane here really easily. I'm going to make from a box, and we got a nice little cube, and I'm going to go ahead and make that box 100. Oh, let us undo the button here. Let's come back here. Let's go ahead and do 100, and then we're going to go ahead and minimize that so we can work a little bit easier. And then I'm going to make another 100, and then I'm going to make the Z value, instead of 20, I'm going to just make it a 1. So I have this nice flat plane. You can almost think of it as like a board. And this is just to illuminate what we're trying to do. And what I'm going to do here is that we've been using the work plane tool here, which is this nice little plane, but next to it is this ruler tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and drop that in. And I want to place that right here on one of the edges of this box, and you can kind of see that my plane is not in the right spot. So there we go. I moved it there. And now what's really cool is we have these measurements that have been placed here for us. And it's kind of just gives us, it almost looks like a ruler, just as the name suggests. It gives us a ruler in the X, and it gives us a measurement in the Y. And we have this cool little feature. We can delete the ruler. Pretty simple. Let's go ahead and place it back there. I didn't put it perfectly there, so let's go ahead and grab the circle, and that allows us to move it. It's very similar to the boxes on our shapes. We can grab the ruler and move it around with that little 0. It's hard because it's really close to the X, and sometimes you can go, oops, I slipped and I deleted my ruler. No big deal. We'll just grab another one and place it out here. Let's check to make sure it's put on the right spot. So great, it's right there on the corner of the grid box and right on the corner of our actual box. And what does the ruler allow us to do? It allows us to reference from certain points. So this is essentially a coordinate plane. You can think of it in that way, and this is the 0, 0 origin. And we may have a design that requires us to place things in certain spots. So let's go ahead and just drop a circle here. Really cool. I mean, a circle, we have a sphere. And now I have the sphere placed, and you can see a couple new things have shown up now that I've selected the sphere. So I'm going to select the sphere, and the ruler is now showing us some additional information. We're seeing the base dimensions of our sphere, which is the 20, the 20, and the 20. But we have these new items here, these green lines. And what they're showing us is the distance from the origin here, this little origin that we've defined at the corner of our plane, the distance that the edge of the object is from the end, or the base of the x-axis, how far up the y-axis we've gone, which is 3.775, and then how far down the x, this plane, how far we are in the x direction, the edge of that sphere. You can kind of see that line that I'm drawing with my cursor right there. And we have the ability to toggle between using endpoints and using midpoints. And for the sphere, they use the end, that tangent point right there on the edge of that sphere, to define where that x value and those y values are. But we can also say, well, I want to reference it from the middle of the sphere. So if I click on these little ellipses, we have these kind of like little lines with a circle. If I click that, it says use endpoint. Use midpoint. And what that's done is it's changed the green line to then reference the center of the sphere. And another green line has appeared as well, which is in the z direction. So we see that the distance is now being measured to the center line of that sphere. It is now being measured to the center line of that sphere. and it is now being measured to the center line. So somewhere right in there tells us where that is. And what this allows us to do is we can change the dimensions of our sphere with the blue text box, but with the green text box, we can actually move our sphere around from reference from this point here on the end. And we know that our plane was 100 by 100, so let's put our sphere right in the center of our plane. And I can do that by just saying, I want you to be in the 50. And boom, it shifts it over to the middle of this plane. If I come over here to the other green one and I say, put you in 50, and now you will see that the sphere is perfectly in the center of our plane. And we've used the ruler, obviously when something goes wrong, we can come back. This allows us to move that sphere directly into the center of our object there. So real cool. So it actually looks like we've got our thing up a little bit. Let's go ahead and hit D. Puts it on the ground. Let's go ahead and put it right in the middle. So if we just say 0, that should put half of the sphere in on the edge of the work plane and the other half above the work plane. Now remember, we do have some dimension here from our plane, which is 1 millimeter, but it perfectly put our sphere right in the center, right on the top there. And so at any time we want to go ahead and change that, we can say, let's put it at 25. So now it goes ahead and lifts it up at 25Z, but still keeping the same dimension in the X and the Y here at the 50. And why does this matter? Well, very often in our designs, we're going to want to repeat something, and we want to make sure it's done correctly and it's done to the exact dimensions that we expect and what we need. And a lot of times that needs to be measured and it has to be perfect. There can't be any room for error in that. And a lot of times we want to make sure that that's done. Very helpful for us to use the ruler tool to do that. So if I know that in my design I need this sphere object to have its midpoint, or you can just say the endpoint, depending on how you want to measure it. I want that endpoint to be 25 millimeters from the edge of this object right there. So now I've gone ahead and moved it there, and then I need it to be 10 millimeters in that direction, and I need it to be 5 millimeters in that direction. Now I have been able to place my cube exactly where I know I need it to be based on my measurements I've made in my design. And the ruler tool helps us do that. And you can easily get rid of it now that our object has been placed where I know I need to place it. I can then come in here and maybe possibly group those items so I can kind of lock it in place, and then I can continue forward with my design. Maybe my design requires some additional shapes to be placed on that object or around that object as part of my design, and now I can continue on making those measurements, making those shapes work in the proper way, whatever your design is. It's obviously your designs are endless, but using that ruler tool to place my shapes exactly where I need them to be is a very powerful feature for you when you're starting to make real world designs come to life, as opposed to just playing and making random objects. When we're actually trying to make something that has form and function in the real world, we need to be exact. We use our calipers, we use our rulers in the real world to get a rough estimate on where we need to place that. We make a design, we make a layout, and we go ahead and come into Tinkercad to make those items. For us to be able to take those real world measurements and put those into the digital world here in Tinkercad, we need to be able to measure and place those things exactly, and we can do that with the ruler tool.